Hello, everyone, welcome back to the World Conflict. Monitor, please subscribe and like my videos. Today, we're diving into a story that's stirring the world. Belarus on the edge, a massive uprising rocks the streets of Minsk. What you're about to see is an explosion of civic unrest, the kind of moment that shakes the foundations of a regime. We'll walk through every facet, from the external dynamics to the internal undercurrents, the performance of the regime and its security apparatus, the safety features and lack thereof for protesters and citizens, the unique selling points of this uprising, yes, even that phrase applies, and finally, what this could mean in terms of cost, political cost, human cost, and wrap it up with a conclusion of what lies ahead. On the exterior, Minsk, the capital of Belarus, becomes the focal point of a popular explosion. Wide boulevards fill with people, thousands, tens of thousands, suddenly all converging, bearing flags, chanting slogans, demanding change. This uprising isn't quiet, it's dynamic and visible. The cityscape, grey Soviet-era buildings, monument squares, the broad avenues of Victory Square all become a theater for mass mobilization. One moment normal life, the next moment the roar of the crowd and the heavy foot of security forces. It is the exterior of power confronted by the exterior of dissent. The regime's symbols, the national flag, the grand governmental edifices, the uniformed security presence all come into direct contact with the people's outburst. On the one hand, you see the regime projecting strength, big state buildings, official banners, flags at half-staff, riot vehicles lining the streets. On the other hand, you see the protesters, held banners, placards, chants, the Belarusian national colors white, red, white flag, voices rising. The visual contrast is striking, institutional facades and the spontaneous eruption of crowds. From this external confrontation, you glean the magnitude. This isn't a small rally, it's a mass movement. The fact that the protests fill central Minsk streets suggests a tipping point. The regime cannot simply ignore these numbers. You see armored vehicles, riot shields, water cannon. You see street barricades improvised by citizens in places. You see the mass of people, young and old, walking side by side, chanting "We will not be slaves," or the local equivalent. It's raw and public. The regime's response is swift: movement restrictions, internet shutdowns, press suppression. The exterior becomes the stage of the conflict. Importantly, the outside world begins to watch. Foreign media attention, social media posts, images of clashes. For observers and for the regime, this is a signal. The internal is now externalized. The domestic has gone global. Now let's turn to the interior, and this is the big section, because what's going on beneath the surface is just as crucial. Inside Belarusian society, inside the buildings, inside the living rooms, inside the nation's psyche, things are shifting. For decades, the country under Alexander Lukashenko has been described as Europe's last dictatorship, with limited genuine opposition, heavy state control over media and civil liberties. But now we witness an internal rupture, ordinary citizens refusing to accept the status quo, mobilizing grassroots, leveraging social media, organizing without the kind of established party leadership typical of past revolts. Inside there is anger at corruption, at rigged elections, at economic stagnation, at a youth who sees no future. This anger, long simmering, is now boiling over. People meet in apartments, private spaces, union halls, quietly at first, then publicly. They communicate via encrypted channels when the internet is cut. They share what the state would prefer to hide. They plan when the night is darkest. They organize even as the cameras roll. They refuse to be passive. Within homes, you hear stories of fear, of neighbors detained, of family members losing jobs for speaking up. On university campuses, there are whispered conversations. In workplaces, there are hushed remarks about "Today we march." This interior dimension includes the doubts creeping through the regime's own apparatus. Does the loyal policeman feel fully loyal tonight? Does the soldier hesitate? The interior cracks might be silent, but they matter. Because if the regime's internal cohesion fractures, that's far more dangerous to power than any street protest. You can see the interior through the way the protesters act, not just screaming slogans, but forming mutual aid, organizing legal defense, documenting brutality. Inside the buildings of power, you see secret meetings of security elites, deliberations. Should we suppress harder or negotiate? Should we open up or shut down? The interior tension is high. Inside the mind of the average citizen, you see a shifting calculation. If I stay home, I'm complicit. If I go out, I risk arrest. But if I go, I signal I'm no longer afraid. That decision, internal, psychological, is central. Meanwhile, inside the state's organs, you see a growing cost. Resources being mobilized, police overtime, jails filling up, the human and financial cost mounting. Inside the national economy, the cost of disruption shows. Factories idle, transport delayed, tourism down. Inside the external alliances, the regime senses pressure. Tightening ties with one friend may strain another. Sanctions may bite deeper. So the interior world of Belarus is in flux. Private lives, institutional corridors, the hidden spaces of negotiation and fear and hope. The uprising isn't just external noise, it's internal transformation. The moment matters not just for the streets of Minsk, but for the interior fabric of Belarusian society. Let's now talk about performance. Performance refers to how both sides, the regime and the protesters, are performing their roles, how effectively they carry out tactics, how visible their messages, how sustained their capacity. From the protest side, the performance is notable. They mobilize despite state repression, despite internet blackouts, despite risk of arrest. They spread images, they hold up flags, they chant, they occupy. They perform a narrative of defiance. Online you see videos of crowds pushing back, of people standing shoulder to shoulder. This performance has an element of theatricality, but that's not bad. It signals to the world and to each participant, we are here, we exist, we will not be ignored. On the regime side, the performance is also intense. Heavy-handed security, arrests, state TV proclamations, attempts at controlling the narrative. The regime shows that it can still act. Riot police sweeping in, media blackout, official denouncements of extremist elements. That performance is meant to deter. But with every heavy hand, the regime extends the reach of the protesters' performance. Images of violence, of detentions, of confrontation spread. The performance of repression can backfire by amplifying the oppressed narrative. In terms of performance over time, the key is whether the protesters sustain momentum and whether the regime nails down stability. If the crowd disperses, if fear returns, then the performance fades. If arrests swell, if morale drops, then repression wins. So far, in Minsk, the performance seems combustible. Masses on the streets, a show of force by the regime. It's a tipping point dynamic. Let's examine safety features. Usually we talk about safety features for vehicles or products, but here we apply the metaphor to this conflict. What mechanisms exist to protect citizens, to limit harm, to provide accountability? On one level, they're weak or absent. Internet shutdowns hamper emergency mobilization. Legal protections are thin. Security forces act under little transparency. Protesters risk arrest, beatings, detention. Others risk being labeled extremists. The state's safety valve, a willingness to negotiate to allow peaceful dissent, is minimal. Instead, we see harsh suppression. Reports document rubber bullets, stun grenades, beatings, mass arrests. The state tries to maintain order at all costs. That order is enforced by fear. However, there are incipient safety features from the protest side, the presence of legal teams, support networks, medical volunteers, documentation of abuse. These are risky, but they provide a measure of protection. When the world watches, the regime's brutality is harder to hide. External pressure becomes a safety feature for the citizen. Also, some citizens are filming, live streaming, creating visibility helps protect. On the state side, one safety feature, is the scale of suppression. If the state believes it can crush dissent quickly, it acts preemptively. That is a brutal safety feature for the regime, but a negative one for citizens. When it comes to unique selling points, yes, let me emphasize that this uprising has them. First, scale. The protests are nationwide, not confined to one city. In the August 2020 wave, thousands poured into central Minsk, and hundreds of thousands across the country joined. That broad base gives the movement a diffusion that makes suppression harder. Second, symbolic power. Belarus is often seen as a backwater of authoritarian states, but here is a moment where ordinary citizens are pushing back in a way that draws global attention. The white flag of Belarus, long banned, becomes a symbol of resistance. That symbolism amplifies beyond Belarus. Third, timing. In a world distracted by many crises, a crack opens and observers lean in. The movement may gain leverage not just domestically but internationally. Fourth, narrative. This uprising is not just about elections, but about dignity, about identity, about a youth tired of being invisible, about a regime that built its legitimacy on stability now losing it. That story sells itself globally. Fifth, networked mobilization. Despite shutdowns and repression, protesters use social media, encrypted chats, diaspora networks. That adaptability is a selling point. Sixth, the cost of inaction is high for the regime now, so the movement has leverage. On the price front, again metaphorical, the cost of this uprising is enormous. For the citizens, risk of violence, arrests, job loss, exile, psychological trauma. For the regime, loss of legitimacy, economic disruption, possible sanctions, international isolation. In fact, the price for the regime goes beyond Belarus. Being a close ally of Vladimir Putin and Russia, the Belarusian regime's instability threatens regional stability. According to news reports, Belarusian authorities released political prisoners, and the West is watching these signals closely. Economically, the country suffers. Protests disrupt business, transport, the flow of goods. Politically, the regime's authoritarian grip may loosen slightly, but that loosening comes with risk of breakdown. For the international community, the price could include migration flows, cross-border tension, security spillover. For the movement, the price is sustaining momentum, staying cohesive, avoiding co-option, avoiding fatigue. One could even assign a speculative price tag. A crackdown costs manpower, equipment, prisons, legal cases. The citizen cost, years of imprisonment, lost future opportunities. The price is measured in human lives, not just dollars. And in the long run, if concessions are made, the cost may include transformation of the state, constitutional reform, reallocation of power. Finally, in conclusion, what we are witnessing in Belarus in Minsk streets and its interior halls of power may well mark a watershed moment. The exterior confrontation is dramatic, the interior shift is profound. The performance of both sides is high stakes, safety features are scarce but emerging. The unique selling points of this uprising give it momentum, and the price being paid is enormous. Whether this movement succeeds or is suppressed will determine much not just for Belarus, but for the region. For the regime, hold tight, suppress, control, risk international condemnation and internal collapse. For the protesters, push forward, document, sustain, risk repression, but carry the possibility of change. The world watches, the cost rises. If the movement stays coherent and the regime fractures, Belarus may enter a new chapter. If the regime regains control, the moment will still leave cracks in the edifice of power, seeds of future mobilization. In short, Belarus stands on the edge. The uprising rocking Minsk is more than a street confrontation. It's a test of power, of society, of identity, of whether the people dare reclaim their state. It's messy, it's unpredictable, it's dangerous, but those are the features of change. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe and like if you found this helpful. Stay tuned to World Conflict Monitor for ongoing updates on this story and more.